Welcome to Insights in Sound, where we talk to the people behind the scenes, behind the technology, and behind the music. People you may not know, but you should.
My guest is musician-composer Lili Haydn. Lili is a violin virtuoso, and in fact, I have this lovely quote here from NPR describing your sound as a mix of neo-psychedelic flower child and rock star virtuoso, which sounds like some journalist was just trying to get some really good brownie points and score some major Scrabble points in a word here, but it is kind of a cool description anyway, and Lili has played with all sorts of a real diverse mix of people, everybody from, let's see, I know you played with Herbie Hancock, the LA Phil, Roger Waters, Porno for Pyros, Tom Petty, no doubt, all sorts of a very wide and...
You're leaving out one of my favorites, which was I got to play for and open for Jimmy Page and Robert Plant on their last U.S. tour.
Ooh, all right. Yeah, you really have been all over the musical map, which I kind of dig,
And Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So you're kind of like me, musically schizophrenic, It's like whatever works, whatever genre of music I like, I will work on, and I think that's great.
It's different manifestations of the same muse. I didn't go with genre, so I don't care as long as I feel it and there's real flow.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I was just getting to the next point, which was that you have that as a composer, you have already scored well over a dozen feature films and have been working in that genre for quite a while. And I think really have shown some amazing chops in terms of your understanding of the mix of music and images, and that's actually something I wanted to get into. So we will talk about that, because I really, being a video person myself, I really do understand and appreciate that, and that's a completely different art form. But I want to start first. I want to go back a little bit and just get a little bit on your musical background, because that's also fascinating, and also just your background in general, because I know that you also were a child actor. Mm-hmm. And those disciplines are all kind of interesting too. So start me off a little bit with I know your mom was a major influence on you. Let's talk about your sort of early formative years, so to speak.
Well, thanks for asking. My mom was the late great Lotus Weinstock. She was the first woman to perform at the Comedy Store. She was engaged to Lenny Bruce the last year of his life. And she was a beautiful singer-songwriter as well. Richie Havens covered her songs, and Tim Hardin. And I grew up listening to her music and classical music. So I didn't grow up with genre at all. I didn't know any pop culture references when I became, an adult of sorts. When I got to college, I was like,
wait, you became an adult?
What's that?
You became an adult?
I never became an adult,
okay.
But when I got to a place when I was not a child, I mean, out on the, in the spacesuit.
Yep.
When the spacesuit got older, as Ram Dass would say. Anyway, so yeah, my mom was my greatest influence, my great love, my other half, and she sadly passed away 20 years ago.
She was also a major influence on a lot of other people too. A lot of especially female performers, comics. I think, she was very influential in terms of that, and I'm sure a lot of that must have rubbed off on you, just in terms of your persona, so to speak, your performing persona.
Interesting. Obviously, it's like any of us, we look in the mirror or see pictures of ourselves and say, oh, that reminds me of my mom or dad, or, Mm-hmm. So I'm always happy whenever I see anything in me that reminds me of my mom.
I could imagine so. Yeah.
She was, I don't worship her, but She was as close as it gets to kind of an urban avatar, a modern day, what do they call them? She was a mensch. she was a kind of anyway, she was an angel, and she is.
Mm-hmm. So now you just mentioned that, she was not only a singer-songwriter, but that her, I think what's interesting there is that in certain ways you were obviously influenced by her, and yet musically, you didn't become a singer-songwriter, the typical girl with a guitar kind of thing. You went in a classical direction.
Well, I do, I am still considered sort of a singer-songwriter. My new album is coming out, and I've got a bunch of, singer-songwritery things. But again, I don't think of it in terms of genre or, it would probably help to be a little bit more focused. But I don't really think of it in terms of genre. For me, being an actor is the same flow and muse that I use when I'm scoring, when the way I'm interacting with a character or dialogue, which is the same kind of aesthetic and part of the brain that is activated when I'm supporting another singer-songwriter, because I think of the dialogue as just the lead vocal in a way.
Yeah, and we talk about, music being, basically a 3-minute movie, in that sense. I mean, I think you raise an interesting point there. The whole idea, there's a very, very strong tie between acting and music in terms of conveying a story, conveying an image, conveying characters. Some of the best lyrics just really set a stage verbally, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of interesting. But why, I mean, you mentioned that you were not necessarily tied to a certain genre. So what drew you to classical and violin in particular?
I had a dream I could play violin, and my mom was compassionate and smart enough to indulge it. And I was not allowed into the orchestra because I was too little. I didn't have a violin small enough for me. And so my mom picked me up from school, and I was crying, and she drove me right to the music shop where we rented a violin. And she found me a teacher and cried at every violin lesson. And the day that I got my violin, she wrote a song in G major so that I could have a sense of playing, so I could play open strings and have a sense of jamming from the beginning, which is really, I think, probably defined my whole life, the way that I engage with music, with anything creative. Funny. I do it before I know what I'm doing, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, but no, it's. I mean, I think it's really cool that she encouraged you that much. And then obviously, well, no, let me ask the flip side of this. What drew you to being an actress?
I was not really, when I was just a kid when I started. I didn't have any. I was just up for anything. It was a good way to pay for my violin and my college education. And I was good at it. And my mom and dad were in show business, so it was just sort of a natural. It was the family business, so to speak.
Yeah. Although I think that's really interesting, because I know a lot of musicians who, even though they're passionate about music and about playing music and composing music, they're scared shitless when they get on stage for the first time. So that kind of mixing of the genres there must have been, kind of healthy in a way.
My mom used to joke that I learned to play violin in the womb, and it was very irritating.
Ouch.
She was performing, and she couldn't afford a babysitter. So I was, so I would just come to the Comedy Store with her and take a nap on stage. And actually, when she was pregnant with me, she got booed off stage by 10,000 people because she told them that she was pregnant and the milk had just come in. and that she should probably, and it was a rock concert. So they said, go home now.
Ooh,
and my mom felt that immunized me from stage fright.
Has it worked for you?
I have not, I don't, it's an interesting thing. My mom taught me how to ride my adrenaline, so that, but there was actually a turn. I mean, in all seriousness, I had a turning point because my mom did a lot of benefits. She performed for every organization that asked her to. And so I've done that myself as well. So I found that when I was performing for people in need, if somebody had, was sick with cancer or, starving children. So if I was performing for a purpose, there was a certain kind of commitment and direct communication that would occur that was not self-conscious, and it wasn't about ego. It was about giving. And then I would get to my commercial shows, and I'd get on stage in a theater or a club or something, and I'd find that my nerves would sometimes interfere with my ability to be truly present, and my shows were less consistently connected. And then one night, somebody that I just performed for, somebody in a wheelchair who I just performed for the night before, came to a club and parked a wheelchair right in front, and it blurred the lines, took away the boundaries, and I realized it should always be about just giving your heart and soul, and that the ego really has no place up there. It's just it's just an impediment. It's like, wearing, like weighing your hands down or something. And so I'm far from perfect, but what I realized then was that being in the flow and giving and connecting to people on a heart level is more important than being perfect. And that will always shine through. That makes a show powerful. To me, that's what makes something, and of course, then you practice and try to do your best. But being on the flow is better than being perfect.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think, you raise an interesting point because, as artists, isn't giving really what we do anyway. I mean, I don't know too many artists who go into it with the goal of becoming rich. And if they do, they really, they rarely actually achieve that goal. Yeah. But I think we all want to, I think for most artists, whether we're musicians or whether we're, whether you're a painter, photographer, actor, whatever, I think we get more of a charge out of people liking our stuff than we do out of, it's great to get a check, we all like to be paid, but ultimately I think we get more excited about, oh, I saw you on so-and-so, or I heard your record or whatever. And, people just giving us that kind of compliment. That's why we do it, isn't it?
Is that, and also because I think, at least for me, there's nothing else that gives my life kind of charge and meaning. And the last couple of days I haven't had time to practice, and last night I was so out of sorts. Like, what is? And I didn't practice.
Yeah.
And so as soon as I get off with you, I'll be. In fact, maybe I'm not going to play for you right now, but I'm going to unpack my violin just to picture myself.
Good.
This is my lovely Italian violin.
And how old is it?
From 1922.
Ooh.
And now, of course, I'm setting myself to play, and I'm not in it's too cold in here anyway, so I'll have to wait next time.
Okay. But leave the case open so that it acclimates and everything and stays in tune. We know all the dance, yes. But I really do think it's interesting that you point to the whole acting and performing thing as, part of what makes you who you are, because I think it's, as an actor, you're looking for your motivation in a role and something like that, and I think being able to do that from a musical perspective also, I love the way the genres mingle like that,
Yeah. And that has been one of the most fun aspects of scoring, which is just really engaging dramatically with characters and with all of my faculties.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because I can imagine that. Well, first of all, let's back up a little bit. Tell me how you went from, you're choosing different paths as we go along. I mean, all of us kind of dabble in the buffet of different artistic pursuits, right? So, you started becoming a performing musician, becoming a recording musician. What was your first exposure to actually doing music for film?
I did a lot of session work for people, and people started asking me to perform on their scores. And then I got a call from Henry Jackman, who is a great composer, who was also at the time was part of Hans Zimmer's team, and they were working on the third Pirates of the Caribbean movie. And he called me in to play on that. And so I ended up doing all the solo violin on Pirates, a couple of the different ones. And I ended up getting to also play and sing, which is something I do at the same time sometimes. And I got to be one of the voices of the evil mermaids. So I'm scaring children in perpetuity at Disneyland.
Awesome. All right. The source of nightmares for kids for generations to come. Mm-hmm. Very cool. Now, I
started doing it, and then people who liked my albums started asking me to score things. And the very first film I scored with an actual composer credit, actually, that wasn't the first film, but it was basically in the last, since I've done it for real, it was called The Horse Boy, and it got into Sundance and did really well at all the festivals. And I thought, oh yeah, well, that's just what happens. You get into Sundance, and
sure.
I didn't realize how challenging it's been. And several of the last, I've had a few disappointments on other films that I've scored that have made me realize how lucky it was. So anyway, and then I did the Sundance Fellowship to the Sundance Institute for Film Composing, and I've gone on to score. It's now like 16 films, and just did my first TV series, which came out yesterday on Netflix and is at number 5 in the country.
Nice. I mean, I think also, what's interesting to me about that, the human voice is in certain ways one of the most expressive instruments there is, Mm-hmm. On the other hand, it's something that we have control of our own voice and training our voice and stuff like that. But, your voice is kind of what you're born with, and you either have a really great singing voice or you don't. And to a certain extent, you can train, but your tonality is your tonality. Yeah. And, you clearly, I mean, when I hear you sing, obviously the influence of the violin is very big in your own singing.
That's interesting you should say that. Thank you for noticing. My mom, I actually learned to play violin kind of learned to play, to sing as an outgrowth of the violin. I think of it really as the 5th string of my violin.
I could see that, yeah.
And on my new album, I don't have, it's like half instrumental. All of my albums have been pretty much, at least a third or more instrumental. Mm-hmm. And I try to only sing. When there's something to say. When and otherwise, I am using my voice instrumentally. So, and the new album is kind of half score, half song, and the voice and the violin intermingle that way.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that I love this about the voice in general, but especially I did notice it with you, is that one of the cool things about violin and a lot of classical instruments, and as a bass player, I know this as well from my own experience, fretted instruments versus unfretted instruments, because it's not just microtonal. I mean, microtones are cool if you happen to be into that kind of music and stuff, but the idea of being able to use glissando and just approach a note as opposed to just hitting a note. As a guitar player, as a keyboard player, you hit a note, but being able to sort of approach it from an upward, path, I think there's a certain expressiveness to that, and to a certain vibrato, things like that I think really come from playing an unfretted instrument.
Yeah. My husband is a bass player, I mentioned to you, and he plays fretless as well as fretted, and he sometimes will take frets off of instruments so that there's the benefit of being able to have that expressiveness. So he gave me, one of my birthday gifts this last year was this little sort of ethnic guitar that he had taken the frets off of. So I got to muck around with that.
That's funny. I played a fretless guitar once, and I found it. Personally, I found it confounding because I'm not that dexterous with. I'm a decent guitar player. I can play rhythm guitar just fine, but there again, it takes a certain virtuosity to play what I call good lead guitar. Anybody can play lead guitar, but to really do it with a certain voice and expressiveness, and I think bringing that to, a fretless kind of an approach, that's a challenge. At least I found it a challenge. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who, can do it just wonderfully, but there really is a different musical expressiveness to that, I think.
Oh, definitely. Well, I have emulated a lot of guitar solos and soloists.
I've noticed.
Gilmore and Eddie Hazel and Jimi Hendrix in my electric violin playing.
Yes,
and
you have a certain Hendrix element to some of the stuff you do. Yeah.
Thank you. I guess the guitar player that I've spent the most time emulating is Eddie Hazel from Parliament Funkadelic. Mm-hmm. I covered Maggot Brain and took part of quoted his solo a little bit. And then when I'm improvising, and you're right, there's a sort of without the frets, you basically have to, you're training, when you're improvising to be a lead on a fretless instrument, you don't really know where you're going to land, and you got to be, yep. You got to know that when you do land there, it's going to be in tune, and that's it's a whole other. It's another skill set, and nowhere is that more obvious than when you are recording an improvised album, which is what my group Opium Moon basically did. We had a handful of themes, but our Grammy-winning album was mostly improvised, and preparing for that is it's like preparing to jump out of an airplane. You really don't know how you're gonna, but you know that there are 20 odd scenarios that might happen, and you got to be prepared and physically dexterous and conscious about how to make that so you don't hurt yourself.
Well, and wasn't it Miles Davis that said that there are no wrong notes? It's just whatever the notes are around them, that make that note what it is.
Yeah, on the violin, I'd say there are wrong notes. You can
there are clams. Yeah.
Intonation can be a beast. So that's what I practice more than anything, is just be sure that I'm in the center of that note.
Yeah, that must take a certain presence of mind, I think. One of the conversations that I've had with a lot of people is the whole idea of, the mix of left brain and right brain when you're an instrumentalist, because you take a lot of left brain, it takes a lot of left brain discipline to learn your instrument, mm-hmm. to the point where you can be right-brained intuitive with it.
Exactly. It's really interesting you should say that. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. And there's a lot of people who say, well, you shouldn't multitask because it diminishes both, activities. Mm-hmm. But as far as I'm concerned, when you're playing an instrument, it's exactly what you said. It's the ultimate in multitasking. You have to be 1,000% present with your left hand and 1,000% proficient in your right hand, and then coordinating them. Yep. Is, then you have to, as you it's like weaving. It becomes its own new single monotask.
Yeah.
And I think that honestly is a metaphor and can be a template for how we approach anything, how we reconcile paradoxes, good and evil, spirit and form, magic and the mundane. All aspects are necessary, and we as musicians have already the DNA of how to reconcile disparate activities or thinking it's ingrained in us. And I think that's what I aspire to, is to be able to be both in the flow and also grounded. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, no, but that's really true. And then on top of that, as you say, your brain is coordinating all of that left brain stuff, but at the same time, when you're really, I know this is true for me, and I'm sure it's true for you as well. When you hit those moments of real inspiration, you're so totally right-brained that it's almost like you're outside of yourself. And, again, mixing all of those together, that's something that really is sort of, mental wiring of a musician, I think.
Yeah, and it has to be practiced as well. So even when I'm practicing scales, and just whole notes to try to find the center of the perfect pitch, I imagine that I'm loving, that it's actually an offering of love, that I'm actually receiving the love and giving the love, and it becomes like a meditation for me. It's not like, it is a meditation, and in the process of reconciling the very mundane and physical, aspect of generating the sound, sorry, I lost my train. I got two in the flow. I fell out of balance because I haven't practiced. That's the problem.
There you go. That's it. Yeah.
So anyway, basically, I'm reconciling the magic and the spirit and the physical. And that act, and as I practice that, I'm actually preparing to do that when I'm actually flying free with improvisation or composition or whatever it is.
Yeah. And there's, a lot of people, accuse us of being, a little bit woo-woo when we talk about stuff like this, but there really is almost a divine intervention of sorts where, like, for example, you write a song and then you turn around later on and you go, wow, I don't even remember where the hell that came from, because it comes, it's channeling through some other path in a way. And I do believe that to a certain extent, the universe kind of delivers that to us.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sort of, I was dear friends with a Jewish mystic by the name of Ras David.
Into the Kabbalah and stuff. Yeah.
Yes. And he would go in, basically, as he was preparing to, go into a real prayer, basically to create a miracle for someone. He would go into a cave basically and not eat for 3 days. It was a preparation for the magic. And so I do think of, when I'm trying to, sometimes it just comes, and then other times, and my life really is the preparation for the magic, to be honest. And that's why I don't have that many friends. I have a lot of people. No, it's I don't hang out a lot. So really, it's I think my mom used to joke. She got into her Jewishness when I was about to turn 13, when she realized that she hadn't prepared me to be bat mitzvahed, and she felt guilty about it. So when she could never be an observant Jew because she had to perform on Friday nights because she was a comedian. And she said, I can't take one day off, 1 out of 7 days off, but she took off 1 out of every, a seventh of every second to be reverent.
Nice.
So honestly, I feel like I try to integrate that left and right brain reverence and determination and spirit and, magic and mundane. I guess that's probably my greatest practice, is trying to do that as often as possible.
I think that's true. And I think it's interesting that you bring that up, because that really is, to a certain extent, what a lot of great artists do in order to get in touch with that, and I mean, I've always found that to be really fascinating, that, to a certain extent, we have to kind of let go in order to,
even as we're taking control.
Yeah, exactly. So let's jump to another sort of juxtaposition there, because, obviously you work on a lot of your own stuff. You're very familiar with the recording process, and, you produce your material and stuff like that. There's another left brain discipline, and, the whole idea of how we interface with, our computers and our digital audio and recording, the recording process, especially in composing, where we're doing a lot of overdubs and we have to sort of envision what's going to be there next, and stuff like that. Now, you sort of came up in you balanced a lot of different eras there, because digital was sort of, becoming a thing, and yet you're sort of learning the process as it's developing, because, digital audio has only been around for, it's been around for a long time, but it's become ubiquitous in mostly recent years. So how does that sort of integrate with the whole composition process? How do you balance the understanding of the technical with the inspiration of the non-technical?
Well, I guess, I don't know anybody who hasn't just had, exasperating days where they're like, supposed to be writing, but I'm stuck in this, and this isn't, I'm afraid to say this in my studio. I don't want to jinx anything. But we've all had days where the technical has eclipsed the inspiration, and that there's nothing more frustrating than that. Actually, the funny thing is, it was about 6 years ago. It was just, the memory just came up on Facebook. I was headlining a festival, and I was promoting my album at the time, and I had production. Like Ableton Live was generating my grooves and my the thing, and it was a great show. And but the electricity was intermittent, and the computer kept shutting down, and my whole production, it was like everything. It was a catastrophe. It was a catastrophe, and my violin, I was going through some effects, and everything was feeding back, and nobody could hear. And I actually almost gave up performing after that, and I just realized I could not ever put myself in a situation where my ability to communicate was dependent on electricity, where solely.
Or on technology.
And so that was that actually sort of helped me pivot toward, I made a record with a great composer named William Goldstein, who has a series of improvised albums that he calls instant composition. And so I practiced to do that, and we made this beautiful record. I think it's called Invocations or Evocations. Mm-hmm. And then that gave rise to Opium Moon, which is the group. And we just put out a new EP, and we're gearing up for a new single in a couple of weeks, and then a new double album follow-up to our Grammy-winning debut album.
You've been hard at work, haven't you?
Hard at work. And my solo album is called More Love. because there's no problem in the world for which more love and understanding are not the answer.
Oh, amen, sister.
Amen. And that's got a few tracks that are in a film that just came out on it called Strip Down, Rise Up, which is on Netflix now. And a few songs that I've been working on for a couple of years. And so, yes, it's been a prolific time. And I think the original question was, how do I balance technology and inspiration? My first album was made on 2-inch tape and with Pro Tools.
Uh-huh.
And at the time, I didn't know how to operate Pro Tools, but I would get frustrated if I wanted to do something somebody else was like tired or tired of me, or impatient and so I just had to learn, I had to learn how to do stuff myself so I didn't have to bother anybody else.
Yeah.
Because I'm a perfectionist, and I also, I'm a perfectionist without being perfect. And so I have, some of that is studio magic. So I had to learn how to do the studio magic. And so there's so much I don't know, but I learn what I need to in order to basically, support my ideas.
And yeah, one could never tell by listening to your music that you're a perfectionist. Not at all. Sorry.
As I've gotten older and more mature, I've gotten more comfortable with. I stopped looking at at some of the imperfections. I only obsess on imperfections that distract me from the emotion. So I don't go in and auto-tune everything. I just, if I sing a syllable out of tune, but the phrase is, has magic in it, I don't try, I recognize that's magic, and I can't just get rid of that because I sang that one syllable. So I learned how to use Melodyne.
Mm-hmm. And also, there's a certain magic to the performance itself. I mean, if you listen back to stuff that was done well before we had this technology, old Motown stuff, for example, I mean, there's a ton of mistakes in there, but it's all about just capturing the moment. Again, the right brain thing, Yeah,
totally. Mm-hmm. And I've worked with one of the guys who I've co-written with a lot is Marvin Etzioni. Do you know Marvin?
I know Marvin, sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. A wonderful singer-songwriter.
Marvin and I both had a friend in common for many, many years, a producer by the name of David Vaught, who had been, he had been in the Association as their bass player. And then I think Marvin worked with him on one of the Lone Justice things. We worked on the Toad the Wet Sprocket record. Marvin's an amazing player and a very, very gifted mandolinist, among other things.
Yeah, and
great bass player too.
Songwriter, and his new album is wonderful. What is he called? There's a song called "Love Letter to America," or "Love Letter to Democracy." But anyway, he and I have written several songs, and there's 2 of our co-writes on this new album.
Looking forward to hearing that.
Including "More Love," which is the title track, and he really taught me to just take my moment and find the magic and not be worried about the rules. Sometimes he is so flagrantly anti, like it's so upside down. It's so wrong. It's right.
Yes. Yes.
And he's taught me to appreciate that. And
those moments are priceless. Absolutely.
I've grown so much as a result of working with Marvin.
Interesting. So let's segue into something that's maybe not as interesting from a creative perspective, but is also kind of important, because you came up right on the cusp of not only technology, but of a lot of changes in the music industry and the record industry. And, I know that, you've worked with major labels in promoting your stuff, and you've done, the what was considered the traditional path for a musician in terms of career moves and whatnot. And things have really changed in the last few years. Nobody cares about having a major label deal anymore. Nobody really cares about, people don't pursue things like getting on a talk show or getting on certain TV shows anymore, things like that as a performer. I mean, scoring is a completely different thing, but the marketing yourself is kind of what I'm leading towards. You've adapted to that pretty smoothly in terms of being able to market yourself and your art in the new era, so to speak.
Thank you for saying so. I feel as confounded as anyone about how to be relevant, and it's really confusing when you spend months on a video or a piece of music to share it online and get 200 likes, and then something something you did as a throwaway, that's not even a song, that's like not a real thing, it took you 5 minutes to do, gets
people rave over it, right?
It's like,
it's confounding, isn't it?
But on the other hand, Buddhism has one of the centerpieces of Buddhist tradition is the koan, which is a poem that doesn't make sense.
Yes.
Meant to be a mind fuck, basically.
Yep.
And a mind fuck can be good for you. It forces you to have neuroelasticity and to find ways to survive and flourish. And so I'm doing my best to stay elastic.
It also forces you to step outside yourself, because that's part of it. When you talk about working on something so intently, like we do when we're working on any kind of a creation, we get so deep inside it. Mm-hmm. And then, you play it for somebody else and they have a completely different perspective on it, completely different perspective on who you are as an artist. And that can sometimes be so confounding in a way, because you've been so deeply inside it for so long that you lose a certain perspective, which, it's the value of a producer, an external producer, for example, or any outside ears on your creation, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. It's easy to get, it's easy to lose perspective. I think my mom used to say, the only thing that's fair is between you and the creation. And so I give everything I have, and it is clearly inextricably linked to my spiritual evolution. And it really, I really want for there to be sort of for the doors to open up and for the response to what I do to be commensurate with the passion that I give. But it doesn't really matter, because it's what my heart has to do.
It's interesting. You mentioned spirituality a lot, and you mentioned Judaism and Buddhism and the Kabbalah. And, I've always found it fascinating that, for example, as spirituality goes, a lot of Jewish spirituality and Buddhism, they're very intertwined. And I think a lot of artists in particular perceive that, because it does point to, in a way, being very, very centered with your art, but at the same time being able to step outside it and allow that divine intervention, so to speak, the creative process to take place on its own.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like Jesus too, by the way.
Hey, they're all cool with me. I mean,
it's what I tend to think of it as revelation is like a song. You get a song, you have to write it down, but is it ever really as fresh as when you first created it? So in a way, a religion is like that as well. It can't. I think every doctrine, in a way, for the most part, came from a spark of revelation, and it became, and it turns to dogma when you when it's not fluid, when you stop improvising.
That's exactly the point right there. And that's what I think is really interesting, because religion as a concept, minus the dogma, they're almost all the same.
Yeah.
They're all at their base the same in terms of human nature. It's when you start interjecting the dogma that you get, Christianity or Buddhism or, any other particular religious sect or belief. But I think stripped away of that and just approaching it from a spirituality perspective, that's really, I think, the basis of a lot of the creative process too, that we as human beings experience.
Yeah. Joseph Campbell has been a great influence. Hero with a Thousand Faces. Have you read that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of my most favorite offerings. And may I share an insight with you?
Please.
Thank you. The commandment, thou shalt not take the Lord's name in vain, to me does not mean don't say goddamn. It means don't use the Lord's name to justify your own vanity, your own vain agenda. And to me, that's the tragic irony of all of the religions that say that theirs is the only way, because that's the vanity that was prohibited.
That's really, that's an interesting perspective. And it's very valid. And, to me, I had a philosophy teacher in college who, he said something that I thought was really interesting, and it stuck with me. He said, organized religion and churches and houses of worship are almost, what did he say? Hospitals for the spiritually crippled. And, I am the last one to put down anybody's particular faith. Everybody has the right to believe whatever they want to believe. But I do think that it's really interesting that, to a certain extent, the further away you get from the dogma, the more they all come around to the same place. There's a universality to them.
Yep, absolutely. And in the same way, music without the rules, the same ascending melodic minor scale I love in jazz is a rag in Indian music.
Yeah.
Is the same scale as in Persian music, as in Chinese music. It's we all, it's the same. The intervals are the magic, and magic is universal, and it can be accessed anytime. My mom, Lotus Weinstock, also used to say, love is always there. It's just we who are not.
That's nice. I like that. Yeah.
And so the magic is always there. We just have to catch it.
Yeah. And musically speaking, I think that's another really interesting point, because as you, I lived outside of the US for a number of years producing music in Europe, and I was exposed to a lot of music that I would not have been exposed to here in the States, because for one thing, Americans are terrible about our own forms of native music. Nobody in America really supports jazz or blues or any music that actually, sort of came out of American culture, so to speak. But it's interesting when you leave the US, mm-hmm. there's this whole different perspective on music mm-hmm. that you gain by being exposed to all these other types of music. And you're right, it all comes from a similar place, that sort of outside of the left brain place that we're talking about, that direct line to the universe somehow, mm-hmm. That's funny. Yeah. So where are you headed in terms of your own career?
Right now, I'm in harvest time. So I've got 2 films and a TV series that are just all coming out right now, and my album a new single coming out March 6th. So this coming, I should probably not date it, but March 6th is.
So by the time this airs, it'll be out already.
Okay, mm-hmm. So I've got a new single out called More Love, and the album More Love is coming out March 26th. and uh, and basically I made there's music on this record that is the music that I would like to be making for films. These were there are two cues on there, actually. They were meant to be untitled cues, and they were both rejected. But I loved them so much that they became the first and last tracks on the album. And I thought, I want to be scoring a certain kind of film, so I'll just make that music for it now. And that's kind of a magical realism, and that aesthetic is in everything I do. But so I'm creating the ground. I'm laying the groundwork for what I hope will be more magical collaborations with great filmmakers and performance when it's time. When I'm allowed to get up in a group of people again.
Well, and I'm always fond of saying that, in certain ways we let the path light up as we walk along it.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're doing very much that, and just letting it take you wherever it's going to go.
Yeah. And I do have a vision. I want to just keep doing what I'm doing, but on a bigger and bigger scale. I'd like for the road, that path with the lights on it, to open up like,
get wider and turn into a superhighway.
And friendlier and friendlier. So that's, I think, COVID has been a real reset for the world. Obviously, it's a cosmic timeout room in a way. And my mom also used to say, no one gets arrested who doesn't need arrest. So, and I think it's been great to, it's been great turning inward and kind of having the breath really become central to our reality, as people have a hard time breathing because they're sick, or because they just have to, because they're covering their mouths, or, the breath is the centerpiece of mindfulness. So
it's the centerpiece of meditation. It's also so important in music, knowing when to let the notes breathe.
Exactly. So we're now in a place where I think hopefully at least some of us are feeling more present, more mindful, more centered on our breath, more, we've seen our vulnerability. We see our interconnectedness. We see the folly of our, arbitrary borders and nationalism. Hopefully our governments will see the folly of the, vaccine nationalism. And we will learn this lesson. And when we come together again, hopefully we'll have, fewer baffles around our hearts, so that we can connect more. And so I want to be part of that flow of connectedness. And that's the future of that's what my future holds.
Well said.
What my present holds anyway.
Well said. I like that. Nice. Lili Haydn, thank you for being my guest.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, I'm Daniel Keller. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join us each week for Insights in Sound.